Hey, I'm Dorie Clark. I'm the author of Entrepreneurial You, and today I am on Dov Baron's show, Leadership and Loyalty. And I'm so excited to be talking with you about how to create multiple streams of income in your business, how to get started on entrepreneurial side ventures, even if you're in a day job, and why you should care and want to do that. And we also talk, most importantly, about Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative and how it applies to leadership. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to be taking a look at the rise of entrepreneurs. Yes. If you're a new listener, new viewer, I want to thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. And if you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we're also very grateful to Inc. magazine, who stated us as the #1 podcast to listen to in order to make you a better leader. Now listen, there are over 1 million podcasts out there, thousands of them that are focused on business and leadership, but there is only one show that is focused on the heart and soul of leadership and business, and that's it. You're tuned into it right here with me, Dov Baron. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, sales leader, entrepreneur, say whatever form of leadership you're in, I'm sure you're aware of the rise of the entrepreneur. The new version of rock stardom is in entrepreneurship. And the question is, do you, as a leader, need to think like an entrepreneur? Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. Our guest today is none other than Dorie Clark. Dorie Clark is an adjunct professor at Duke University School of Business. She's the author of several books, including Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, and Stand Out, which was named as the #1 leadership book in 2015 by Inc. magazine. Not too bad. A former presidential candidate spokeswoman. The New York Times described her as an expert at self-reinventing and helping others make the changes in their lives. A frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review. She consults and speaks for clients including Google, Microsoft, the World Bank, and you can download her free Entrepreneurial You self-assessment workbook and learn more about Dorie Clark at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the returning champion, none other than Dorie Clark.
Thank you, Dov.
Good to have you here. So good to have you here.
Very glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
It's a while since you and I chatted, but I actually don't have too many guests that I invite back. They've got to be rather special. So it's good to have you here. And I was thinking about it actually this morning, and I have to admit that before we met the first time, which was over Skype in the middle of 2016, I was pretty unaware of you. We chatted over Skype initially. I fell in love with you, thought you were amazing, what you're doing was great stuff. And then I had you on the show, of course. And then it was actually about this time last year, you may remember, that we were in New York City together having dinner.
We had dinner, yes.
Yeah, and that was wonderful with theater producer Michael Roderick, Michael Ian Cedar from The Legacy Show, Willie Jackson from Abernathy, Bill Bricker from Silicon Valley, and it was, sitting around with all that. And since then, you've become this media darling. More than that, media darling in Canada as well. I'm watching Canadian TV, and there's Dorie Clark from New York City. I'm like, what is going on? They're not calling me, they're calling Dorie. So, huge congratulations to you, girl. I'm proud of you. That's awesome. You've done really well.
Thank you.
In the intro, I talked about you've had 3 books. Stand Out, Reinventing You, and your latest, which is Entrepreneurial You. I want people to know, because your books are fabulous. So tell them, first off, just can you give us a quick overview of the first 2 books, and then we're going to come to the new one.
Absolutely. So Reinventing You is my first book. It is about professional reinvention and how to evolve yourself into the job or the career that you want to be in. And in many ways, it was a book inspired by my own journey. I started out as a journalist and got laid off from my job and had to reinvent myself. And so I went through some of the career iterations that you mentioned, everything from being a presidential campaign spokesperson to running a nonprofit to then starting my own marketing strategy consulting business 11 years ago. And so I wrote that book to really provide a roadmap for other professionals to reinvent themselves more successfully rather than just kind of fumbling around like I did. My second book, Stand Out, was in many ways a kind of sequel, because I realized once you reinvent yourself into the job or career that you want, there's a next step, which is how do you become recognized for your excellence? How do you stand out from the crowd? How do you become known as being among the best at what you do? And so that was a book about really how to develop the ideas that would get you acknowledged and then build a following around them. And then finally, Entrepreneurial You, it's the capstone of the trilogy. It's about how do you make money from doing those things? How do you monetize your expertise?
Yeah, this is your this is your Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
So the new book, Entrepreneurial You, talk to us about that particular piece, because you say what the entrepreneurial mindset actually means and whether you need that, whether a leader needs that, because a lot of people. We have very many entrepreneurs who watch our show, listen to our show, and we also have very many people who are in corporate gigs, and they're going like, well, yeah, okay, so what? Do I really need that? And I think they do. And let's hear from you.
I think they do as well. And my appreciation for this was really solidified in that moment that I alluded to, where it was my first job out of graduate school as a journalist, and I had been doing it for about a year. And I got called into the HR office, and I did not, being 20, 21, 22 years old, I did not know what it meant to get called into the HR office, and I left without a job. And the newspaper industry is pretty cheap, and so it's a lot more stark even than in some corporate environments. They gave me 4 days severance pay, so
4 days?
Yeah, so I had worked Monday, and so they were nice enough to pay me through the end of the week. But unfortunately, the day that they chose to lay me off was a big day in U.S. history. It was Monday, September 10th, 2001. Oh. And the next morning I woke up jobless, and the entire world was in chaos. And so somehow within a week, I had to figure out how to support myself moving forward. And once you have an experience like that, you realize this is all fragile. This is all an illusion. This safety, this safe job, that could be gone at any minute. And I came to realize that the only safety is in diversification. And so if you're an entrepreneur, you diversify on one hand with different clients you work for. I would argue that everyone needs to even take it a step further. You need to diversify by the types of things that you do. And this is equally true for employees at companies. Even if you have just one sideline that you're doing, even if you do a little coaching on the side, you do a little speaking on the side, whatever, that is a hedge against uncertainty. It's a way to bring in extra revenue. It's a way to develop your professional skills. It's a win-win across the board. I now have 8 different income streams that I've cultivated over time. And for me, that's where the security lies.
I think what you're saying is very powerful and very poignant in today's economy, because, we all got big slap on the wrist in 2008, 2009. And now we look at the Dow Jones and it's, crazy high. And people, I think, have a false sense of security, the same false sense of security they had in 2007. And, for me, I can say I don't want this to be true. I would love to be wrong, but I see a crash coming. Right? And so when the bubble bursts and the crash comes, what are you going to have left? Now, the answer to that appears to be entrepreneurship, but I want to challenge back for a bit because, okay, if you're in the corporate job, they lay you off, they make all the cutbacks, gone. Okay, but in the entrepreneurial world, people also stop buying in a crash. So help us understand that. How, for the entrepreneurial person who, or maybe even the corporate person who's sort of getting their feet in the water a little bit with entrepreneurship, they're going, okay, well, yeah, if I lose the job, at least I've got this. But then the friend says to them, well, no, you don't, because people won't be buying that shit when they ain't got any money because their job went away too.
Yeah. So I think if you have a corporate job, I would say, start with one side income stream, right? Like it's a fool's errand to say, overnight you're going to make 10 new income streams. Can't do that. But over time, the goal really is to expand. I like to suggest maybe every year or so, think of a new income stream and start adding that on, right? And so if we think about real diversification, you're absolutely right. There are certain things that people are going to stop buying in the midst of a recession, but that's why you need to diversify across price points and across the way things are delivered. So, for instance, I do corporate speaking. That is something that gets cut back a lot in recessionary environments. But, okay, they may not want to pay a lot of money to fly somebody to a conference, but what do they do instead? Well, there's a substitution. They are interested in webinars where it's cheaper and they don't have to, fly people. They're interested in online courses because, again, it's self-paced. You can do it from remote. So you think about, okay, if you can build up those lines, that's a hedge against a hedge.
Right.
And so, for me, for instance, the income streams that I have now, I do consulting and coaching. Those are kind of high-end, bespoke, hands-on services. Same with corporate keynote speaking. I do executive ed teaching for a business school. So, that's another method. I have my books that I've written. That's something that, they're $20 a piece. People theoretically will still be able to buy books. I have online courses that I do, which are at a multitude of price points. I have everything from $100 course called Be More Productive to a $200 course on rapid content creation to my flagship $2,000 course, which is about how to become a recognized expert. I do affiliate income, and then I also do live events and masterminds.
Right. I mean, that's a great example of it. But I think the challenge with it is that even at that level, it can, particularly I think if you've been in a steady job, the idea of entrepreneurship can be pretty overwhelming. And then when you throw at them, you need diversification of incomes and multiple streams of income, that can seem, if entrepreneurship is scary, multiple streams, pace it back a little bit for the person who's in the corporate gig. Where would you say start? Like, here's your beginning. Where do you start?
Yeah. So, and of course, as I mentioned, one at a time, right?
Of course.
I think people should they should literally just put blinders on. Once they pick like the thing that they're going to focus on, just do that for a year. Don't even read the other stuff. Don't even let your head get turned by it. Where I like to suggest that people start is, I am big into de-risking. I don't want people to put out a lot of money for anything. So I actually like it when people start with coaching or consulting. And the reason is, of course, there's zero startup costs associated with it. If you have your computer, you can do whatever you need to do. It's not like you have to build up an infrastructure in order to do that. And also, you don't have to have an audience at that point. Now, it's always helpful, of course, to have an audience, but for something like, let's say you're doing live events, if your live event isn't going to make money unless 500 people come, well, it's like, well, where do you get the 500 people? It's like you're going to have to pay for advertising, or it's going to be this crazy stressful thing. That's a hard model when you're first starting. Cool. But if you're coaching, just about everybody has some expertise in some area. And if you have 5 friends and one of them's like, oh, Dov, that's really helpful. Wow, I could use more of that. You're like, hey, I just started a coaching business doing it. Would you like to hire me for a few hours? Boom, you have a client. I am all about ease and speed and efficiency. And so I think coaching and consulting are really great entry points because it gets you close to your customer. You learn what's actually on people's minds, what they care about. You practice your skills, you get good. And then once you do that, you can start to expand and leverage yourself.
Yeah. I think there are parts of it that are very complex and maybe overwhelming for some people, but the simplicity of it is exactly what you just said, which is, where do you already have some expertise? I mean, we used to have a program called Authentic Wealth Mastery, and one of my challenges to people was, don't go get any more education, but look at how you can monetize what you already know. Because there's somebody out there who wants to know what you know, and the challenge around that is you've devalued it because you know it. Right? I mean, everybody knows this. That's one of the things I'll say to somebody. I go, what is it you know? And they go, well, everybody knows this. I guarantee you they don't. And I guarantee you there's some people who really want to know it, who would happily pay you some money so they could find out how to do it. So let's flip to the other side, because we've talked about the corporate person being entrepreneurial. But for me, entrepreneurship and leadership are in many ways facets of the same thing. However, many entrepreneurs, particularly solopreneurs, don't see themselves as leaders. Tell us your thoughts on how to be a leader if you're an entrepreneur, even if you don't have any employees.
Yeah, you can understand sort of the feeling of confusion in some ways, because leader, of course, implies followers. Right. And so people might say, well, where are the followers? But I think that people who are solopreneurs or people who don't have any employees absolutely can be leaders. You just have to recognize where the followers are. They're not necessarily in your office. They're in your community. They're in your orbit. And so I think you can be a leader through the content that you create. I'm a big fan of content creation. In my Recognized Expert course, I actually teach the principle that in order to become a recognized expert, there's 3 levers you need to push. And the first one, the key one, is content creation. Because you have to, if you're going to be recognized for your expertise, well, guess what? You've got to share your expertise so people can actually see it and say, oh, wow, that Dov, he knows what he's talking about. So you can become a leader. That's right. Mostly. But if you're blogging or you're creating a podcast or things like that, that's a way of being a leader because you're sharing your ideas, you're sharing your expertise. And certainly, of course, there's ways of being a leader with volunteer and charitable associations, being the head of a professional association or an alumni group or things like that.
But I know that this is part of your expertise, but how do you stand out from the noise? Because again, entrepreneurs watching, listening are going like, geez, you have no idea how much competition there is. Have I got to spend another 20 grand this year on Facebook ads? And the corporate leader is going, okay, I'm going to put my feet into this water. But, when I look at the market, every man and his dog is a consultant in XYZ, which I'm supposedly have some expertise in. So it can feel like you're just a whisper in a very noisy crowd, and it's very easy to get sort of quietened down and never really rise to the surface. Because I know, just as a sidebar here, I know people who are spectacular at what they do who've never gotten that recognition, and I've also seen people who are quite average who've done spectacularly. Help us understand that, Dorie, because I know this is something you're very good at.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I have become fascinated as well, Dov, with that question, right? Like, why is it that these brilliant people are not getting the recognition that they deserve? Right. And so in developing my Recognized Expert course, which is based on my book, Stand Out, I've interviewed, literally hundreds of experts over the years to try to understand and unpack that question of how did you come up with the ideas you got known for? How did you build the following around them? How did you come to prominence? Because in our culture, we often treat it like success is either overnight success, because that's a fun story to tell, or we treat it like, oh, well, that person's always been famous. Yep. Just forever. Yeah,
he came out of the womb famous.
That's
right.
Came
out of the womb with 1 million followers. No, that's Kanye West kid. Okay.
Yes, Northwest.
Northwest.
But, obviously there was a moment before and there was a moment after. And so I wanted to look at that. And so I'll share with your audience the other three levers, right? So content creation, social proof. Essentially, that's what is your credibility? Why should people listen to you? What are the markers of credibility you have? And then third, it's your network. Who do you know? Who knows you? Who is able to be your ambassador in spreading the word about you? What I have come to understand is that if you do not have all three of these layers, all three of these levers, you will pretty much not succeed. And I think that what I see again and again, the problem for so many people that are talented, that are smart, and are not getting recognition is that they're making a big mistake, which is that they are doubling down on the things that they're good at. And this is an area where you have to have all three. You can't just have one thing you're good at. You need to be reasonably good, be exceptional at as many as you can, but you need to be reasonably good at all three. And so if I do an analysis, oftentimes the really talented but hidden folks, they're maybe good at two, but they're just crap at one. Or, maybe they're great at one and kind of average at the other two. We in our culture hear a lot about playing to your strengths.
Yes.
Strengths Finder 2.0, all that.
Yeah.
In general, that's great. But there are some times and some circumstances where it's not about your strengths. It's about mitigating your weaknesses. And this is one of them. And in fact, if people are interested, I actually created a free tool. It's probably the one that I'm proudest of. It's the Recognized Expert Evaluation Toolkit. And it's a scored assessment that I created in collaboration with my students in the Recognized Expert course, where you can actually get a score for yourself on each of these metrics to see where you're strongest and where you're weakest.
Fabulous.
And if folks would like it, you can get it for free at DorieClark.com/toolkit.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. DorieClark.com/toolkit. But it can give you some clues about where to focus and where not to. But I mean, for instance, I have a guy that I love. He's a really good, friend. He's a great networker, but he's pretty much like, he doesn't create content. He's a guy that knows everybody. And everybody's like, oh, you're so cool, you're so great. But because he doesn't create content, everybody loves him, but no one knows what to recommend him for. Because they're like, well, what's your expertise aside from just being a great guy and knowing a lot of people?
Right.
And it creates a void where, he would love to monetize his network, but it's very hard for his network to know how to present him.
So, number one, content. Create content. So, let's just unpack that one for a moment, because a lot of times people will go, well, content about what? Right? Because there's a distinction is, here's what I know, or if you're like me, I know a bunch of stuff, right? So here's what I know, or there's a bunch of stuff I know, and then comes out of it, well, does anybody want what I know? And how do I know if they want what I know? Which is what an entrepreneurial thinking person is asking. Okay, I'd like to get into this. I know some stuff. Maybe I know a lot of different stuff. But how do I know what it is that they would pay for? Because that's what it comes down to. That's the final stamp on the letter is, yep, here's the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're asking the right question, because sometimes there's also a misalignment in terms of content creation, right? Because people, they might be trying to sell XYZ service, and then all their blogging is about ABC. Right. It's like, oh, I want to coach people on their personal brand. I'm blogging all the time. Why aren't I getting results? Well, what are you blogging about? Oh, I'm blogging about running. I mean, it's like, well, the two things just don't match up at all.
Right.
So the first point is that your content should always be in your head, essentially a lead magnet. Your content should be something so that your ideal client ideally would read this article and say, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for. I have to call this guy so I can get more of this. And so your content should relate to the issues that are plaguing your ideal customer and show that you have good ideas and good solutions about that. So that's the first thing. Now, in terms of the type of thing that you can offer, you're absolutely right. It's not real until money changes hands, right? So you need to get the client. I'm a big fan of testing things, of course. One way to kind of look at it is to see, first of all, are there people that pay for this in general, right? That's a useful thing. I mean, so we know, for instance, if you're a leadership coach, we know that there are people who make money as a leadership coach. It's not like some weird thing like, what's a leadership coach? It's feasible for some people. So the question is, okay, if the market in general is okay with that, what can I do to make them choose me? Yes. If you're trying to sell something that's really unique, like I remember, like probably 15 years ago, I knew a woman who was a rolfer, right? And rolfing, like nobody knew what it was. Right. I mean, even now, it's like
even now, there's a lot of people who are like, "What is that?"
yeah.
Oh, they're going to stick fingers into painful places. What?
Yeah.
Not signing up for that.
Exactly. So it's a holistic modality, but so now more people know about rolfing. But back then it was like, what's a rolfer? So she not only had to sell herself, she had to sell rolfing as a concept. Yeah. So your marketing is a little bit different that way, and you kind of have to think about that. But if you know that, okay, theoretically people do pay for this thing, then it becomes a social proof question. This goes to the other piece of the recognized expert puzzle, which is how do I get the social proof so that people will say, well, if I want leadership, I want Dov.
Right. Okay, so they've come up with content around a subject, but again, how do they get to the place of beyond the noise? Because let's say they want to do leadership coaching and they go, well, look at Dov, or look at Dorie, or look at whoever it might be, any one of the people that we know, and say, I can't compete in that world. I'm not at that level. How do they find that point of differentiation?
Sure. So there's a couple of things I'll say. So one, and this is a point that I make in my book, Stand Out. Yeah. This is where a niche strategy is really useful, right? Yeah. Because it's very hard to compete in this vast, broad arena. I mean, leadership is it's huge,
It's massive.
I'm going to be an expert on sports. Well, like, really? Every sport played everywhere in the world? Like, you don't even know where to start with that. But if you say, you know what, I'm going to be an expert in badminton. I'm gonna like rock badminton. That's actually an achievable goal. Like, I could tap somebody today and make them the world expert in badminton commentary through sustained content creation. I mean, I'm willing to bet that if you decide that's your thing and you say, you know what, for 90 days, every single day, I'm going to do one more blog post about a different facet of analyzing badminton, the SEO is going to be out of control. Even if you're just doing it on LinkedIn or your own blog, there's going to be so much information about a semi-obscure topic, at least, in the North American market, that you could really do that. And so I think niching is powerful.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to keep in mind, and this is where a lot of people go wrong, a lot of people miss opportunities, is setting a realistic framework. And one thing that I talk about in my book, Entrepreneurial You, is that a lot of times people quit too early because they don't understand that you have to be doing this work, this content creation work, for probably about 2 to 3 years before you see any results.
Bravo.
Any. And after 2 or 3 years, it starts to come in. And after 5 years, you're like, whoa, like it's like really happening. But those first few years are extraordinarily discouraging. And a lot of people give up, whereas if they plowed through, they would have come out to the other side.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? That's what I was saying at the beginning about this. Today's rock stars are entrepreneurs. And that's great, because instead of buying a guitar, people are actually doing some work, which is fabulous. But the problem with it is, like rock stars, people expect to make it now. They expect to make it instantaneously, to be the overnight success. And this is not new news, folks, even for old people like me. We all know overnight successes take about 10 years. I'm trying to remember, a friend of mine told me about another speaker. He's a speaker, and he'd been a speaker for, this friend of mine had been a speaker for about 6 years. and he was doing pretty good. Like, he was making about $300-400 a year, so he was doing pretty good. And he said that he had had this conversation the year before with another speaker he highly respected who'd been speaking for 10 years. And he said, am I doing something not right here? And he said, no, you're doing everything right. And he said, why? And he goes, because it takes 7 years. It takes 7 years. But he said, but between 5 and 7, it'll make this shift that you won't believe. And most people will not go that long, particularly today, particularly millennial mentality is, well, I've been doing this for 6 months, and this person was famous in 5 minutes with an Instagram account. So that's part of the challenge, I think, is, this, as you said, the realistic expectation of the investment in yourself and in the business. And I get how easy it is to not lose faith in yourself because you've been working, like Gary Vaynerchuk says, you've been putting in 16 hours a day for a few years, and you go, when is it going to happen? And it is a balance. It is a distinction, because it's like, I've been putting in 14, 16 hours a week, and I haven't gotten the recognition. Am I on the wrong path? Or I've been doing this for 14, 16 hours a day for a couple of years, and am I about to break through? Any sort of guidance you can give around that for somebody who's maybe in that place right now?
Yeah, it is devilishly difficult in the moment to be able to tell the difference between it's not working and it's not working yet.
Exactly.
It is extremely hard. I actually talk about this a bit in Entrepreneurial You, my latest book, and the woman that I interviewed, Stephanie O'Connell, she's great. She's a millennial personal finance expert. She's actually I'm doing a mastermind retreat for some of my participants in a couple of days, and Stephanie's actually coming to give a guest lecture, which is great. But what I loved about her story, and part of why I included her in Entrepreneurial You, is that she said that in the early days, in that period where she was not getting a lot of concrete evidence that she was succeeding, she was really good at focusing on small wins and understanding that money couldn't really be the metric at that point. What was the metric was looking for small forward signs of progress. And so in her case, she said a really big moment for her was the first time that an influencer that she admired retweeted one of her posts. It's like so insignificant it might feel like to some people, but it's like, no, that's a sign that someone she respects her work.
Yeah.
Or she said a big deal was the first time that somebody offered to pay her for a blog post. Now they offered to pay her $25. This was not a lot of money,
sure.
but she was getting paid. Her work was worth money,
right.
And she had never had that before. And so those little things were the evidence that she needed to keep herself going.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because I think you've got to focus on the wins, and it's very easy to focus on the defeats, but you've got to focus on the wins. And it's funny because, I mean, you're highly recognizable. I certainly have a decent social footprint, and I was on Twitter the other day, and every now and then I search my name to see if somebody posted something that I missed. Because if somebody posts something about me, I will always like it. And this guy had posted something, and he said, "Can you believe it? Dove Barron, the Dove Barron is following me." And I was like, yeah. Of course I can believe it. But it's like,
yes, love it. Like,
oh yeah, I guess I'm that guy. And it's funny, right? It's funny because we all do it to everybody else. We put somebody else there, and we forget that they were where you were. We're all moving up the ladder. We've all got people that we look to and we respect, who we go, oh, really? Yeah. Oh, this person wants to have me on their show. Isn't that wonderful? I got a wonderful endorsement from Tom Bilyeu from Impact Theory. I was like, how cool is that, right? It's fantastic. And I think you've got to pick those wins, because, as you said, I think that money, it's the ultimate metric. We've got to use it because you've got to pay the rent. But it can't be the only one, and it can't be the one that counts or matters most, certainly for the first couple of years. So you've got to have sustainability. So again, coming in the loop here, for the entrepreneur who's starting out, how do they sustain themselves in this 2 to 7 years that we're just talking about?
Yeah, so financially, you mean how do they sustain themselves? So this is why caveat, this is not what I did. I don't recommend what I did. I left my job and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go look for some clients now. And I was lucky that I had some contacts that I had worked with previously who were willing to give me some work within the first couple of months of launching my business. But I don't recommend that for other people.
No.
What I actually think is a much better idea is, in fact, going really full circle, for people who are interested in entrepreneurship to begin that process while they have their day job and their steady income, and experiment nights, experiment weekends, build something up until you see that it has traction.
Yeah.
And if you love your day job, you may decide to stay there forever. You may just have a nice sideline that you like and you do both. Amazing. If you would like to be a full-time entrepreneur, if you don't like what you're doing, then great. Once you've built something up so that you see that it has potential, you see that it has momentum, it's starting to bring in some actual money and actual clients, that's when you can jump and go into that full-time.
Yeah, I was like you. I did the crazy shit. And mine was different and not working for somebody else, but I had a business in a completely different world that I was part of for 13 years. And then when I can't bear this anymore, and walked away from a very successful business, gave it to my business partner, and almost went down the toilet financially. I mean, like this close to flush, right? And it was a dumbass idea, and I should have, I got carried away, and now I would never recommend that. I say to people, build a bridge. Build a bridge. If you can build a bridge, build it. If you can't, I understand that, then you got to go all in. But if you can build a bridge, build a bridge. Again, though, the interesting thing for me is, you were New England Press Association award-winning journalist. You directed a documentary. You were a spokesperson for politics. You got a master's degree in theology.
Boy, you went deep into the bio, Dom. That's good stuff.
Well, you've got these many different pieces yourself. So that for me is very interesting because you're actually speaking on an expert in the very thing you did, which is made an entrepreneur of yourself because this is why I'm actually asking you this harder question, which is how do you boil it down? Because you could have said, okay, well, I'm going to work with people around understanding theological thinking, or even philosophical thinking, Socratic thinking. I could have worked with people around being around environment or politics or directing or, you and I have that in common. We've got this wide area of subjects we could potentially go into, but you pulled that. Why?
Because it's what people would pay for.
This is what I want people to get. So how did you get that? Because there must have been a pull with the other things, because you studied them and you did them, and obviously you enjoyed them to whatever degree. So how did you go, yeah, this is the one they're going to pay for?
So when I started my business in 2006 as a marketing strategy consultant, first of all, I pivoted a lot at first. And sometimes you pivot because you discover that people, for whatever reason, are not interested in paying for things. And sometimes, it's just finding the fit with yourself. So sure. I'll tell you a couple of examples early on that might give a flavor of this. So when I first started, I actually thought that the business that I was going to start was being a political consultant.
Right.
And because, I'd worked in politics, that's what I figured I could do. For whatever reason, where it was in the election cycle or who was running or whatever, I couldn't get any candidates to hire me when I first started. And, I later got some political work, but it wasn't happening at first. Meanwhile, other people that I had worked with, actually ironically on political campaigns, were now running nonprofits. They were working in government, and they were like, "Hey, can we hire you?" And I was I was like, well, I'm not going to turn down money. And so I basically scratched the political consultant off my credit, off my business card. And I was like, okay, I'll be a marketing consultant. And so I went into that because people were wanting it and offering it. So I did that. And originally, again, because this is what I knew, this is where I had my skill set, I mostly honestly did PR consulting because I had, working in political communications. That's kind of what you do. You're sort of, pitching stories to the press, etc. This was in the mid 2000s, and it was A, where social media was first starting to take off, and B, newspapers were just like, a sinking ship, and they were cutting their so-called news hole. That's the amount of space that that they have in the paper, basically. And so I saw, like, from 5 years before, I could literally see over a 5-year period things that would have been front page coverage or front page coverage in a section of the paper were no longer, they weren't even being covered, or maybe they were like in B18 or something. And the clients would get mad at me, like I somehow wasn't doing my job. Like, why didn't you get us on the front page? And I'm just like, dude, I did everything. They don't have reporters anymore, okay? That's why you're not on the front page, is they do not have reporters to send to your press conference. You can't compete with, like, whatever, an embezzlement and a fire and, whatever. No one is going to cover your thing anymore because they're just not there. And so I realized it was getting demoralizing enough that all these people kept thinking I was doing a bad job because of no fault of my own, that I'm like, I'm not going to do PR anymore. This sucks. And so I saw that the traction was with social media because nobody understood it, and everybody's like, how do we get that? We need that. So I'm like, great, I'll do marketing so that I can help people figure out how to do social media.
It's interesting because you had an ability to do something that I think oftentimes people don't recognize. And I hear this often in my interviews, actually, is, well, I didn't really plan for this, but people wanted it, and so I started doing it and discovered I loved it. But what I also find when I interview other people, not necessarily on the show, but other people, is they don't actually recognize that people are knocking on their door saying, will you teach me this, or could you do this for me? They don't. It's kind of like, it's what I call unconscious competence. They're so good at it, they think everybody knows how to do it, and they just don't think there's any value in it. And they say, yeah, my friend wants it, but nobody's going to pay that. You got that. How did you do that? How did you twig that this isn't just another one of Dorie's many talents, that somebody's, yeah, sure, they're going to pay, but that this could actually be a business? Because I'm sure there's many people watching this who are going, I don't know if people, I'm good at that, but...
Yeah, well, in the case of like social media consulting, the truth was I wasn't good at it either because it was new, right? So no one knew anything. So I figured that if I could just learn it, like if I had the time and the desire to learn it assiduously, then it was something that everybody wanted to understand. So I saw the opportunity there. But an example, kind of like what you're talking about, is I was very resistant for a long time to doing executive coaching because I didn't really have enough exposure into executive coaching per se. What I had seen more examples of in the marketplace was kind of like life coaching, where people pay $50 for not always that helpful or that well trained kind of stuff. And I didn't want to devalue my brand. Right. And so I had to kind of get comfortable with the idea of coaching and understand how it could really properly fit in a business context. And so I had a lot of people that were coming to me like, oh, do you do coaching? And I was just like, nope, don't do that. And finally, after a while, I just realized, even I realized that I had been asked so many times. I'm like, dude, you're just leaving money on the table. That's ridiculous. You need to figure out a way to do coaching. And so I decided that I would start offering that. Yeah,
it's smart. That's what it is. One of the things I like to ask my guests is, I think Dorie, that in 1990 I fell off a mountain and got smashed up, and I've said that I believe that human beings all have falls. Mine was quite literal, but other people's is not. Sometimes it's a divorce or a bankruptcy or whatever it is. But those falls are, I don't believe that they're turning points in people's lives, but they're a catalyst for a turning point. Because people tend to think of that it's kind of this straight line trajectory from where you were to success, and now you're this household name, blah, blah, blah. Can you share with us an experience of a fall for you? Where you, I mean, aside from, you mentioned the one of losing your job, is there something even more profound for you? Or was that it?
Well, I mean, if you're thinking about things that were like really traumatic, I mean, you know, losing your job is pretty traumatic, especially when there's like this national catastrophe around it.
Right.
But even then, I knew I could figure something out. Like I wasn't despondent. I wasn't, I was pretty resolute. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna figure something out. And so I scrambled, and I did. I got a lot of freelance work. I really, really hustled for it, but I got a lot of freelance work and was able to, I wasn't making a lot. I was making maybe on an average week, maybe $400 a week writing my stories, and on a good week, I'd make about $800 a week writing stories. But I made it. But no, probably the hardest thing was actually just personal things. In 2013, which was the year that my first book came out. So, I mean, in theory, you want to be promoting that. You want to be doing all this stuff. I had a breakup of a long-term relationship, this really bad, acrimonious breakup where I had to commit my now ex. That was really not good. And then my cat, who had been like my rock, my best friend. I'd had him for 17 years. He died of cancer that year. And so I was trying to like launch a book, and, I was having to travel more than I ever traveled for work before, and doing these things. And so I was so ragged. I was just like really completely numb. And, that's where work is good, I guess, because I threw myself into work. But I was in a really emotionally, just divorced place. It was just profound enemy.
You brought up something there that I think is very important for people to grasp. And what I mean by that is that people think of that straight line trajectory, but it is possible to be in two places at once.
Yeah.
So feeling the grief of the breakup and like you said, all the massive amounts of pain around that, the grief of losing your friend in the 17-year-old cat, and you talked about that when we were having dinner, actually, and how devastating that is. So you've got grief on all sides, and then the other side, you've got all this celebration of this book that is like, oh my God, and it's taken off, and you got to be all over the show. I want people to really grasp that it's possible to be in two places at once, and that one is not exclusive of the other, because I think we give ourselves shit and go, I should be happy because my book is there, or I can't be happy because my book is there. No, you can be happy that your book is there, and you can be sad that your cat died.
Yeah. You
can be both at the same time, but you have to accept that you're a bigger human being than a single facet. And I think that is often so lacking in us. We so want to be, as I've said a million times, people's lives don't exist in social media. They don't exist on Facebook. We like to think that that's what their lives are, but it's not what their lives are. Even if they tell you their 17-year cat died, that doesn't in any way relay the depth of emotion. And the fact that as a teeter-totter between that and the celebration and success of the fact that I'm on the XYZ show promoting my book. I really want people to grasp that, and I really appreciate and want to thank you for sharing that with us. How do you feel that may have made you a better person, human being, and maybe even leader in your own way? Going through that juxtaposed sense of being.
Yeah, well, it certainly clued me in to the fact that is happening for pretty much everyone, I have a good friend who's a very successful business author, and, has her own company, really just like knocking it out of the park. And she had a boyfriend who was a drug addict, and she kept having to take him to rehab, and he eventually died. He eventually overdosed. And it's just, no one has, any idea about stuff like that, but everybody's got something like that. And so I think it does sensitize you to a certain extent, and also make you realize that, it's like the, I think it is a good sense of perspective. Just, there's the, I don't know. I heard this in a movie, so I'm not sure where it came from originally. But there's there's this like sort of legend or whatever that there's a guy who has a son, and everybody's like, oh, you must be so so proud. You have the son, and he's like, we'll see. And then the son breaks his leg, and everybody's like, you must be so sad. Your son broke his leg, and he's like, we'll see. And then the country goes to war, and all the boys get drafted except for his boy because he's injured. And so it's just the ups and the downs. So I think I've become much more acutely aware of that.
Yeah, things are not often what they appear to be. That's an actual old Arabic story. It's a beautiful story.
There we go.
It's a beautiful Arabic story. But I think that when we own what has happened to us, we either decide to, many people say, oh, well, that's just the past. And of course it's not. But what it can become is a massive position of compassion. Because now when you look at somebody, one of my quotes is, the act of compassion is the willingness to love somebody who doesn't appear to deserve it and someone who doesn't appear to need it. And underline the word appear to need it, because on social media, we're all lovely, we're all spectacular, and we all drive Bentleys, and we all have perfect sex lives, and none of us have got any weight on us, whatever it might be. But the fact of the matter is that that's not real life, and I love that you shared that with us so that people can have understanding and compassion about the difficulties of life and the challenges, and that we look at the Dorie Clarks of the world and go, I want to be her. But you don't know what that's like. And I learned that from a very good friend of mine years ago who said, you're looking at this person and you're holding yourself up to that measure, but you have no idea how tough that person's life is. It looks glorious, sure, but what is it really like? You have no idea. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. What would you say, we're getting close to the end and I want to make sure I get these in. So what would you describe as the soul of leadership? If you had to pin that down, what would you say it is?
I would say that the soul of leadership is, I studied philosophy in college, and we took a seminar on Immanuel Kant, and there is a philosophy which I think is pretty good. I mean, Kant, frankly, he's a little boring and he's a little complicated. He's not my favorite philosopher. But there is something that he created called the Kantian categorical imperative, which I think is actually really smart. Is essentially his updating of the golden rule, right? And his updating is, if we're really thinking about how to be moral, which I think, of course, morality and leadership is pretty closely entwined. If we're thinking about how to be moral, think about your actions as though everything you did became a universal moral code. Would you still agree to do it?
Wow.
If you're Roy Moore, would you go after that teenage girl? If it meant that everybody goes after teenage girls? No, you might say, that actually might not be a good idea. Would you start that fight? Would you start that affair? Would you speak sharply to someone if that meant that was going to be the rule of how life would be? And I think thinking of it that way, if you're a leader, I think a leader is somebody who strives to keep that in mind and to set an example that really could become a code for everyone under him or her.
Brilliant. I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you. That is brilliant. So let me ask you, what is it that, as you look at the world today and leadership today and even entrepreneurship, what is it that could scare you? What is it that could keep you up at night if we don't do something about it?
I'm not really particularly sure that there's anything in entrepreneurship that keeps me up at night. I'm worried about coastal flood zones. But entrepreneurship, I feel like we're rocking. We're rocking.
But it's interesting because, you talk about coastal floodlines, but, for me, I had this discussion with another great leader today, again, another woman, and I said, I want to see way more women in leadership because I'm meeting women in leadership and they have this wonderful position, thank God, and I see more men with it too, but not as many, unfortunately, and that is that they are fully capitalistic and fully considering of the planet. The two things are not mutually exclusive, that you can care about being a really successful capitalistic entrepreneur and you can give a damn about the planet and the people on it. The one is not exclusive of the other. And so I think actually what would, in that line would be an entrepreneur who doesn't give a crap about coastal lines.
Yes.
So it's actually it actually is a fit. What if there was one thing that our listeners, our viewers could take from what you've talked about today, one practical thing that you would want them to really get about their entrepreneurial self, whether they're presently an entrepreneur, whether they're a solopreneur, whether they're in a corporate position, what is that one thing you want, that one practical thing you want them to get?
Entrepreneurship is not for some special class of person, some special personality type. It is a methodology. It is something that everyone can do and everyone can learn. And I think that people who pretend otherwise are often either making an excuse for themselves if they're not doing it, or they're being self-congratulatory if they are doing it.
Okay. Well, you've created an 88-question entrepreneurial self-assessment for people to actually work that out, right?
That's true. Absolutely. If folks would like to get the self-assessment for free, it helps you work through how to develop multiple income streams in your own business. You can get it at DorieClark.com. It's DorieClark.com/entrepreneur.
Great. Because I think that, I think it's important for people to actually grasp that. I think that entrepreneurship, I've talked a lot about this. I think that the days of the job are dead. And if you're still clinging to the job, you're clinging to a dinosaur. It's just a matter of time until there's going to be very few jobs. Government jobs are going down the toilet. Every other, and even large corporations are doing more and more virtual employees. They don't want all the expenses of a normal standard employee. And why would they? Can't blame them. So you better get out there and be entrepreneurial and tap into the wealth that you already have. And that's what I love about Entrepreneurial You, what you're doing with this book. This has been fabulous, Dorie. I want to ask you a final question before we sign off. Your 70-year-old self, people always ask you, if you could go back to being 20, what would your advice you'd give yourself? I flip it around. I go this: your 70-year-old self gets to visit you. What does your 70-year-old self say to you? What's 70-year-old Dorie giving this Dorie as a piece of advice that maybe you need to tweak a little bit and work on?
This is what I'm trying to figure out, Dov. I am not sure if my 70-year-old self would say work less and spend more time dating to find a partner, because that's a good investment, or if my 70-year-old self would be like, just be patient and don't worry about it. I don't know what my 70-year-old self would say, and so I'm trying to ascertain what is the right move. So yeah, up in the air. I'm waiting to grasp the future.
I have some hints for you on that one, and part of it comes in what you were saying about entrepreneurship. It's actually knowing where your strengths are and knowing. It was great. Listen, it's been great having you on the show. I always love talking to you. It's been a real pleasure, and I sincerely want to thank you for being on the show. And again, I encourage everybody to go and tap into Dorie's resources. www.doreclark.ce. I forgot the E. No, okay.
No, you forgot the I.
Wow.
It is complicated.
No, dyslexia is a wonderful disease. That's why somebody named it with a word that nobody who is dyslexic can spell. www.doreclark.com. DorieClark.com / a bunch of things. Go to that one. You'll find all the other resources. Tap into Dorie's resources. They're fabulous resources, and I encourage you to go there. You can find her on YouTube. She's got tons of great videos on there. There's tons of blogs and articles. Go search her out. There's a ton of resources. And whatever interview you're on, you'll always find great things from Dorie. I encourage you to go there. I want to thank Dorie, and I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you here.
Thanks, Dov. Take care.
Thank you. Just stay with us until the end, and I want to thank you, dear viewer, dear listener, for tuning in. And remember that the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive, that the fastest growing companies often hit a point where they realize that they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing top talent, only to have those talent leave them at an alarming rate. If you're sick of training and developing talent only to have them leave you before you got your ROI, get yourself over to fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into your purpose. Fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Remember to also stop by the Matrix for your self-assessment test on your leadership, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, Full Monty Leadership, saying, stay curious, my friend, stay curious about the entrepreneur inside of you and how to tap into it and guarantee your future. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I'm out.